I do want to begin by thanking the San Francisco Labor Council for arranging the space, and Local 87 for all of their, SCIU Local 87 for all of their kindness and setting it up for us and making it available, because it's really nice when the book is about the labor movement. Much of the book is about the labor movement. So, and I write a lot about the Justice for Janitors, which is part of what we're building here. So I really appreciate that. I also want to say we do have some people. Is the sound quality okay? We do have some people here I do want to acknowledge. Just fortunately, because he's not on my email list, but I happened to call him yesterday, we have one of the great UFW photographers with us whose work has just been accepted. His whole 2,000 print archive has been accepted by Yale University for everyone to see, and that's John Lewis. John in the back there, I want to thank you for your work. This is John's photo of Cesar Chavez on the cover, and he's got other photos in the book. John did some work in the 1966, particularly on the farm workers that no one else has covered. It's really great work, so I thank you for being here. We also have one of the real icons, one of the major characters in the book, major figures in the book here, Fred Ross Jr. Fred. And you know, as I wrote, if you saw my piece in Beyond Cron this week about the legacy of the Obama campaign, you know, we often say it all started really in 1949 when Fred's father, Fred Ross Sr., ran a campaign in Los Angeles, a Mexican-American, and not won a city council race there in over 70 years. And do the kind of work the Obama campaign is now doing to voter registration, door-to-door outreach, the whole bit. What you had is Fred Ross winning that for Edwin Roybal, and there's still Royballs today in Congress, so it shows you that legacy's also gone on. But that's sort of the start of the entire sort of where we got to today. So thank you, Fred, for that. I also want to, Dave Glazer, hopefully will be here. I don't see him right now, but from HERE. Let me just sort of use this time to sort of give the big picture of the book, so you have a sense of what it's about and why I wrote it. I always was struck by the fact that there were all these younger people, mostly, who just in the late 60s, mid-60s, late 60s, and early 70s, you know, saw a little table, maybe on a campus or in a shopping supermarket, that said farm workers or boycott, and ended up getting involved not simply for a day or a march or one particular rally, but ended up spending their entire life doing organizing, well after they left the farm workers. That there was something very transformative about the farm worker experience. And when you look at the sort of history of the UFW and what happened, I mean, there was a period from the when Cesar Chavez started in 1962, and then had the, 1975, they get an Agricultural Labor Relations Act, so it's like this giant victory in, here's Dave, I just mentioned it, I will say, both Mike Casey and Dave Glazer from Unite Here, and I'm going to get to how, the incredible role, what all these people have in common, I should say, with Mike and Dave and Fred, and it seems like everyone I wrote about in this book, Eloisa Medina, Jessica Gove, they never seek publicity or credit. So when you say, gee, I've said to Dave Glazer many times, gee, Dave, after people read this book, they're going to say, how can we never heard of Dave Glazer? It's because he never seeks credit. And they always want to make sure that someone else gets credit, they stay in the background. It's really the sort of Fred Ross Sr. model, where the organizer doesn't get the credit, the group gets the credit. And that's why the people I'm writing about have done these amazing things, and a lot of people don't know them. They're not household words. So maybe this book will change that. But I always thought it was very exciting to see the young people and what was it about the UFW. And then I looked at all of these campaigns that we were doing now. When I started the book, it just turned out, due to coincidence, that the Hotel Workers Rising campaign was beginning. Good luck for me, because that was the big national campaign to raise hotel workers' wages to the level of middle-class jobs, and they had a whole big national hotel boycott. And I found out that when they were planning their national hotel boycott, they showed a video to various groups, and the video was all about whose boycott? The UFW. And they had words on the screen from Cesar Chavez. So we saw the connection between what was going on in 2006 with a national hotel boycott and how they were looking to the farm workers movement as the legacy and as giving them direction. I wasn't even aware, and I've known Mike Casey quite some time, that he got his start organizing farm workers in Ohio, the Farm Labor Organizing Committee, and had some training from Fred Ross. So, I mean, you could almost say it's a very small world, and it all sort of starts with the farm workers movement, and all these people have gone off and done all these great things. This particular, I mentioned Justice for Janitors in here at Local 87, I've talked to very experienced activists, and I said, did you know that Justice for Janitors was started by someone from the farm workers movement? Stephen Lerner. No, I didn't know that. Stephen Lerner was the farm workers? Yeah, he was in New York, so he wasn't as well known as being a farm worker person. And he had the idea that, hey, farm workers, janitors are kind of like farm workers in high-rises. You know, and that's the phrase he used. And so he started a campaign in Denver with another UFW alum named Susan Sation, who works for the Cal Fed, Labor Fed. I believe she still works there in Oakland. And then they had the big thing in Los Angeles, which I have a picture of him being like almost assaulted by the police in Century City, the big kind of, and then people are familiar with the movie Bread and Roses and the whole Justice for Janitors. I have a chapter on a campaign in Miami, University of Miami in 2006 that talks about the janitors organizing. But again, here's someone who learned stuff as a young person, and he skipped college, as some people did. They were so entranced with the movement. Here's a young person who gets the idea, gee, we did this at the UFW, I wonder if this will work for a whole different urban population, and it does. The same strategies and tactics taken from the fields into the suites, as it were. It's interesting because people often tell Stephen Lerner now, gee, well, of course it's easy for you to organize because Latino immigrants are very easy to organize, you know. And people say that. Yeah, Latino immigrants, they're pro-union, they just sign the cards, they're all into it. And he said, gee, when I started this, everybody said, forget it, you can't organize Latino immigrants, you know? And it's interesting, I don't think people are going to be surprised when they read the book and they find that Saul Alinsky made a comment when Saul Alinsky, he thought Cesar Chavez was crazy. He said, Cesar, Latinos are an urban people. You need to move those farm workers into the cities. He thought it was crazy to try to organize farm workers. And in fact, when Cesar engaged in his famous 1968 fast, the one that really brought national attention to the movement and brought Robert Kennedy out at the end of it, Alinsky told Fred Ross Sr. he was embarrassed. He didn't know how to explain to funders that Cesar's out there fasting. Now, of course, we know the fast is one of the most effective strategies. And right now, as we speak, there's a nationwide fast headquartered in Los Angeles out of the farm workers' spirit. They have Cesar Chavez's fast and saying, now we're doing it today. So, you know, you see so many examples of how people don't even know the connections between the movements today and what was going on back, in the 60s. And that's what this book is really designed to do. It's designed to say to people, hey, there's a lot of connections here. This is a movement that should not be evaluated by the current membership figures of the UFW. Because that's kind of what some of the media has done. They say, gee, the last 20-odd years, the UFW's membership has really declined, so therefore the legacy of Cesar Chavez and the farm workers movement isn't really very significant. And what this book argues is you don't evaluate the legacy by the current membership numbers, you evaluate it by the Hotel Workers Rising campaign, by the Justice for Janitors campaign, by all of the incredible immigrant rights work that people like Eliseo and Fred and Ross Jr. have done. That's how you evaluate it. I think, if you hopefully buy the book and read the book, you'll be convinced that this is a movement that really lives on today. Now, I had no control over the fact that Barack Obama, after the New Hampshire primary, saying, yes, we can. I'm sure glad he did. I was thrilled at that because, although it's interesting, this may surprise you. Does everyone know that yes, we can is the Si Se Puede? Does everyone know that here? Because it might surprise you that when I was at the convention in Denver and I was handing out this bookmark which had the connection, a lot of people were saying, I didn't know that. Is that where it's from? Because when Obama said, yes, we can, he never said, identified it with Cesar Chavez. I don't, to this day, know exactly why. I know in New Hampshire, at that point, the UFW had endorsed Hillary Clinton, and Dolores Huerta was very involved with Clinton, but it's strange to me that he didn't do that. Now, the whole audience interpreted it, and often when Obama is saying, yes, we can, the crowd is shouting, Si Se Puede, and there's signs up everywhere. But, you know, he gives this story, if you look back at his, even his speeches, he says, when this happened in the past, you know, we said, yes, we can, and he never identifies it where it really began, which was in an Arizona hotel room in 1972 when Dolores Huerta was confronted by some Arizona labor folks who said, we can't recall the governor. Cesar was trying to recall the governor at that point in Arizona, not where they had a big, strong base. He said, and they said, we can't do this, this is crazy. And Dolores Huerta said, Si Se Puede, yes, Si Se Puede, we can. And Cesar decides, hey, that's going to be our rallying cry. Great idea, Si Se Puede. And it's been the rallying cry now for the last 36 years. You know, I mean, it's quite, now it's the presidential campaign. It's quite astonishing how that spirit, you know, when we had the immigrant rights marches, the main chant in those marches were Si Se Puede. You know, again, and because people feel the spirit, they're not saying, oh, well, let's not talk about Si Se Puede because the farm worker membership is down. They're saying, you know, what is the spirit? We're motivated by the spirit of the farm workers movement. And I think that's what really we're trying to convey in the book, is the spirit of the farm workers movement and the power of it in this thing. To give some examples, you know, there are so many people, you know, I mentioned Eloisa Medina, how many people in this room, I mean, this is not the best audience to ask this question, there's people who have not heard of Eloisa Medina. Has everyone here heard of him? You ever heard of him? I'm amazed how many actors haven't heard of Eloisa Medina, because again, he doesn't seek publicity. And in fact, prior to him being sort of like a frequent spokesperson in the immigrant rights movement, I don't think you'd ever, if you Googled him, his name would come up very much. And yet here's a guy who, at the age of 19, or actually he walks in 1967, there's the first farm worker election, and Eliseo has like a broken arm, and he can't pick fruit. He was a farm worker. He walks into the farm workers' headquarters, and he sees Dolores Huerta, and he says, oh, no, I can't pick fruit, anything for me to do. She goes, well, we have this election. Oh, really? What's that about? And they hook him up with Fred Ross, Sr. And suddenly, just a regular farm worker, never thought about being an organizer, starts saying, hey, this is kind of fun, and becomes an organizer under Fred Ross. They then send Eliseo to, they say, we need you to go to Chicago. Well, he says, okay, fine. He packs his bags. He asks what bus to take. You have to get on a plane. He didn't even know what Chicago was. You know? Now that's amazing. And yet he gets on a plane and becomes a phenomenally successful coordinator of the Midwest Grape Boycott. You know, first in Chicago, then in Cleveland and Chicago. I mean, so talk about people just given a shot when they haven't had experience. But so then he has that experience, big success. And I write about this next part of the book. They send him down to Florida, not exactly a big labor hotbed, particularly in the early 70s, 72 when he went down there. And he goes down there, there were these anti-farm worker bills that were all over America. The national agricultural growers they got one in Oregon. In the Oregon case, in 72, the legislature passed the bill. It got to the governor's desk. They made the mistake of, he didn't sign it right away. And so the mistake was that Fred Ross Jr. here and Jerry Cohen, who was the general counsel of the farm workers, who there's a lot on in the book, they went up to Oregon, and Jerry gave a public statement on the steps of City Hall saying that if they signed this anti-farm worker bill, the UFW was going to circle the entire state and not let any produce in or out. Now, that would be kind of hard to do, but it became a big story. I mean, like, oh my God, threats made to the future of Atwater's economy. They had a vigil on the steps of the State House. And with all the trouble Fred Ross Jr. here was also stirring up, you know, the political price became too high. And so Governor McCall vetoed it. The farm workers won. That was when in Arizona they passed it, and that Governor Jack Williams signed it. That's when the whole recall thing happened. The courts threw out the recall, but they ended up registering enough voters for the first Latino governor of Arizona to be voted in 1974. But Eliseo goes down to Florida, another inhospitable climate, and he arrives, and the bill is pretty much, this anti-farm worker bill is pretty much considered a done deal. He meets with the labor leaders, and they say, you know, we don't really think there's much chance here for this to pass, for you to stop this. If I were you, I'd just compromise, work out the best deal you can. And Eliseo says, we're not compromising. That's not the UFW way. We're going to go out and we're going to fight this thing. And he's taking on, I have a picture in the book of Eliseo with all these people in suits. I mean, he's just a guy just going down there. He had no money. No money. You know, agribusiness in Florida is pretty powerful. I think people probably know that about Florida. And so here you have one guy coming down here saying, I'm going to defeat them. I think ultimately they raised $500 and they won. How did Eliseo do it? It's in the book. I mean, it's amazing how he outfoxed them, out-strategized them. By the end of it got to the point that the legislature didn't want anything to do with the bill. Eliseo had folks coming down from DC, and the whole state's economy became like jeopardized if they passed this bill. I talk in the book how he did it, but that's an example of the genius of Eliseo. And then he goes from there, and he ends up, when he left the farm workers, ends up eventually in Texas. Then he comes down to San Diego, was organizing thousands of workers, and gets to LA, where he and Miguel Contreras, who used to work with Mike Casey and Kevin O'Connor, who's here from Local 2, because Kevin is also another UFW guy who went to Unite here, that they all, he got there with Miguel Contreras, and they really transformed Los Angeles politics by bringing the farm worker, the UFW electoral model to Los Angeles. And so you may recall in Los Angeles in the 1990s, they had a Republican mayor for 2 terms, Dick Reardon. Labor was not doing very well. By the end of the decade, by 2005, they were electing a Latino mayor. Labor is more powerful in LA than they've been maybe ever. And Latino voting is very high because they brought the UFW, Eliseo, Miguel, particularly Miguel, just transformed the political climate with farm worker electoral tactics. And then sort of to bring that same model was then expanded statewide in California to great success, and I describe all this in the book. And then in 2006, Eliseo decided to set up this Mi Familia Vota with a bunch of other groups, SEIU and Unite Here playing pivotal roles. And in 2006, they just do a pilot basis. They win some key races in Colorado and Arizona. Now they've got in 11 states. And if you wonder why New Mexico is not even in play anymore, and Obama's going to win easily, why Colorado, Nevada, and Florida will likely go for Obama, it's because these folks who got their start in the UFW developed a model for Latino voter outreach, which is changing the whole political culture.